Okay, welcome back. Today we're going to be looking at right triangles, and we're going to be looking at something called Pythagorean Theorem. And that a theorem in math is a rule that was discovered, and this was discovered by Pythagoras. And it just is a rule that was discovered to show that if we can figure out the length of this long side in a right triangle. And so Pythagoras was looking at triangles and noticing that there was always a relationship between the two sides of the triangles called legs. So the legs are the two sides that make the right angle. Those are called our legs. And their lengths had this direct relationship to that diagonal side. And that diagonal side is called the hypotenuse. And so the theorem that Pythagoras came up with was a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So if you took the length of side A and you squared it, and you took the length of side B and you squared it, the sum, when you added those two values together, always ended up being the hypotenuse squared. So we're going to go ahead and use Pythagorean theorem to solve for either the length of a hypotenuse or the length of a leg when we know the other sides. So here's our first example. Now, the most important thing that we always want to do is identify the legs. The legs form the right angle. So that means that these two sides are my legs. So I need to label those A and B. It does not matter which one is A and which one is B, but I need to label them so I don't make any mistakes in my formula. So my formula is A squared plus B squared equals C squared. So in this particular problem, A is 12. So 12 squared plus b squared is 16 equals c squared. So the first thing I'm going to do is multiply those out. So 12 squared is 144. 16 squared is 256 equals c squared. So I'm going to add 144 and 256, and I get 400. And so then what I'm going to do is take the square root. Now, at this point, you can use a calculator if you have one for finding the square root. That's perfectly fine. And so the square root of 400 is 20. So that means that that green side that's missing over here has a length of 20 centimeters. Now, we can use Pythagorean theorem not only to find the hypotenuse, that was the hypotenuse that was missing, but we can also use it if we know the hypotenuse to find the leg. So in this particular triangle, again, we always want to start with our legs. We've got a leg here and a leg here. Notice that one of the legs lengths is missing. That's okay. We can solve for that. And it's labeled B. So I'm going to label 5 as A. And again, remember that your hypotenuse, that diagonal side, is always C. So I'm going to label this as C. So my formula, A squared plus B squared equals C squared. So I know A to be 5 squared. I do not know B. That's what I'm going to be solving for, but C is 13 squared. So 5 times 5 is 25 plus B squared. 13 times 13 is 169. Now I have a two-step equation that I'm going to be solving. And so I start, remember, by subtracting my non-variable value, my constant. So I'm going to subtract 25 on both sides. And I get b squared equals 144. I'm running out of room here. I'm going to take the square root of both sides. And I get b equals 12. Now, some of you might be thinking, wait a minute, in the last section, we learned that there should be two answers. It should be plus or minus 12. Well, when I'm looking at a triangle, is it possible for this distance to be negative 12? No, remember, distances cannot be negative. So when we're talking about shapes and distances and lengths, we're only using the positive value of the square root. Okay, so go ahead and use your formula to try finding some missing values in a right triangle. And it's important to note that this is only true of right triangles. This does not work for triangles that do not have a right angle. Only for right triangles. All right, good luck.